Here I am. Good morning. Welcome to episode 97 of Duval Rundown. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm 2 minutes late, but had a lot of responses to my post on X/Twitter this morning. I asked people for your mock drafts. Go to at Gus_Logue. That's GUS_LOGUE on X/Twitter. And go to my latest post if you want to submit your own mock draft. I will be grading your mock drafts this morning. I got more responses than I anticipated. I'll try to hit all of them, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. First, to give some more time for people to submit their own mocks, I'm going to be doing my own mock today. But before I get to that, before I forget, just want to plug one more time the 1010XL draft guide, which will be released at 10:10 a.m. Eastern this morning. You can find it at 1010xl.com/Jaguars or just 1010XL, or go to social media and we'll have plenty of links there. But it'll be, I think it's 136 pages. It's definitely well over 100 pages in a PDF available for free, again, at 10:10 a.m. So pretty much, maybe not right when this is done recording, but pretty soon after, you can find the 1010XL second annual draft guide, which has over 100 prospect profiles with bios, stats, player comps. We've got 5 roundtable questions. We've got a big board from me and Mia and Trent Osborne. So there's a lot of good information there specifically for Jaguars fans as it relates to the 2025 NFL draft. So make sure to check that out. But today, as we're doing each Monday leading up to the draft is 3 weeks from this coming Thursday, I believe. So it's coming up. We got under a month. So pulling up my latest mock right now. Where is it? I gotta scroll past all the ones that you guys already submitted. Here we go. All right. So you guys are probably going to be mad. And let me know in the comments how mad this would make you, especially the first round pick. I broke down this player a little bit last week. If this is episode 97, I guess it was episode 96 with Hacker. Talked about Georgia edge/linebacker prospect Jalen Walker being, in my opinion, the biggest sleeper name to watch out for the Jaguars. I think the general consensus, and rightfully so, is that the Jaguars will probably, quote unquote, sprint to the podium if one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter is available at the 5th pick. If not, they'll probably go with whoever's available / higher on their board between LSU offensive lineman Will Campbell and Michigan defensive lineman Mason Graham. But I don't really see a scenario where all 4 of those guys are off the board before the 5th pick, considering Cam Ward is a heavy sportsbook favorite to be the first overall pick, the quarterback out of Miami. But if for some reason, like the Jaguars did not take Mason Graham or Will Campbell and kind of shocked the world, then I think that the pick that they would make that would shock the world would be Jalen Walker. In general, again, like what I said last week on Friday's episode, I think that Walker has been on my radar because there's a handful of kind of industry experts, draft experts that have had him really highly ranked. And it's not just guys that are like great at like scouting players. Obviously, if you're like a draft analyst, you're partly scouting players, but you're also kind of talking to sources around the league to kind of like get a feel for players, for where they're going to go, what concerns teams have with them, what positions teams view certain players at, stuff like that. And so Dane Brugler, who I give credit to John Shipley. Mia O'Brien was on this really early too, but John Shipley was the first person that I noted said like, oh, there's a chance that the Jaguars could draft Trayvon Walker first overall in 2022. But Dane Brugler was like the very first national analyst that I heard make that suggestion. But Dane has Jalen Walker 3rd in his big board. Jalen Walker can usually be found around like from like the 12 to 20 range typically, because there are question marks of whether he's going to be a linebacker or an edge defender at the next level. I think that the answer is probably both. I've seen a lot of Clay Matthews comps, who is, I feel like, one of the first guys, at least in my memory, of outside edge pass rusher who would also drop into coverage every once in a while for the sake of keeping the defense versatile and keeping the offense guessing. And so I think that like Zach Bond is another one that I've seen where Bond is kind of like more of a linebacker who also will like line up on the line of scrimmage and blitz a lot. on third downs and passing situations. But to go back to the expert thing, Daniel Jeremiah actually mocks the Jalen Walker to the Jaguars in one of his recent mocks. And so Daniel Jeremiah actually mocked Jalen Walker to the Jaguars. Dane Brugler also has him way higher than consensus. And so I think that Jalen Walker, in general, he also has like leadership intangibles that are off the charts, apparently. So those are all kind of things that, like, in general, I think could like push him up the draft board and maybe be a top 5, top 10 overall selection. Specifically for the Jaguars, I think that he would work. Like I've said before, that like the Mason Graham pick would potentially tell us a lot about the Jaguars and a lot about Anthony Campanile and what he wants to do with his defense. Because if Mason Graham is picked by Jacksonville, then that probably means that they're going to be asking their defensive linemen to be more of like penetrators and gap shooters and just like get into the backfield and create disruption. And that'll like end up creating a decent amount of like negative plays as a byproduct, because that's kind of a high risk, high reward system, as opposed to like a more conservative approach would be like asking defensive linemen to really just clog up gaps, hold their blocks, and kind of let linebackers and even safeties do more of the dirty work behind them. And so if Mason Graham is picked, then I think that would be a sign that the Jaguars' defensive scheme will be more of the former, where they are more of a penetrating front and just want to cause disruption at any cost. And so on the other hand, I think that Jalen Walker would be a sign that, yeah, the Jaguars are going to be trying to be disruptive, but they're like might be trying to be the disruptive defense in the league. Maybe the second most disruptive, because I think Brian Flores, what he's doing with the Minnesota Vikings is kind of like second to none. Flores always has like crazy high blitz rates. Always has guys like up at the line of scrimmage, and not even on like 3rd and 11 situations, but also like even just like on 1st and 10, he's trying to get a ton of bodies up on the line of scrimmage and then have the offensive line and the quarterback kind of guessing who's going to drop in coverage and who's going to blitz. And so it kind of creates a lot of mind games for the offense. And so I think that Jalen Walker would be like the perfect guy for a Brian Flores type defense, where like you have him constantly up at the line of scrimmage, but he has the ability to rush the passer pretty much as well as he can drop into the coverage either in man or zone and pick up an offensive weapon. And so I feel like he's just like the versatile center or versatile chess piece in this year's draft class. Obviously that doesn't always work out. Isaiah Simmons, the guy from Clemson, who's kind of a linebacker safety hybrid, clearly didn't really work out too much. But yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I think that like we're kind of all thinking in Jacksonville, is Anthony Campanile going to run something closer to Vic Fangio's defense, which would be more of like those conservative fronts that are just holding up gaps and really all the magic happens in the back end? Or is it going to be more like Todd or not? Yeah, is it Todd Halfley or Jeff Halfley? I always get them mixed up. But whoever the Green Bay Packers defense coordinator is, who Anthony Campanile also has experience under, which would be more aggressive. But also Brian Flores' defense, which again is like even more aggressive than most aggressive defenses. Campanile did spend 2 years at least under Brian Flores when they were both coaches in Miami. And so, again, I think that the Jaguars' first-round selection, especially if it's a defensive player, is going to tell us a lot about what they're going to do. And I think that if Anthony Campanile is just like trying to be the most as aggressive and versatile and make the opposing offenses guess as much as possible, Jalen Walker would probably be the best pick for that. So, yeah, I think that pretty much is my explanation for why Jalen Walker could be a good pick for the Jaguars. PFF did give me an F grade for this, which was the lowest individual grade they gave for any of my picks in this mock. But I assume it's more than anything because, I mean, they have got Jalen Walker listed as a linebacker here, and so probably some positional value grade knock right there. But then also, again, Jalen Walker is typically found in like the like 12 to 20 range of most consensus big boards. So taking him at 5th overall would certainly be considered a reach in general, but I don't know. It'll be exciting to see where this new Jaguars regime ends up going throughout the draft, obviously, but especially in the first round. So after the first pick with Jalen Walker, the guy who I think will mostly play on the edge, but also has the ability to play off-ball linebacker and can really be lined up in a variety of spots. So after going with that just front 7 chess piece in Jalen Walker, I went with defensive line, Derek Harmon, with a 36 overall pick in this mock. Harmon is a guy that Mia and I talked about on last Thursday's show, episode 95. As Mia said, like there's the Earth theory where there's just only a limited amount of guys with the size that can play in the NFL. So largely because of that, Derek Harmon has been mocked in the first round. I feel like you could go as high as the 17th overall pick to the Bengals and as low as the 36th pick, or like somewhere in the middle of round 2. I'd probably be like a late round 1, maybe early round 2 selection. But after passing on Mason Graham in the first round, even though I did go with a front 7 player and someone who I think can really impact opposing quarterbacks, I did want to make sure to bulk up Jacksonville's interior defensive line. Harmon's a funny prospect because like his body type is more of like that kind of occupying gaps type of guy, just holding blocks, letting the linebackers do dirty work behind him. But the way that he plays is like more like a penetrating player where like he's just like always trying to get after the quarterback. And so I think that's admirable. I think that if in the scenario that the Jaguars did pass on Mason Graham with their first round pick, even if they went with like a Will Campbell or something maybe a little bit more realistic, I think that Derek Harmon would probably be at the top of their list of guys they'd be interested in the second round at pick 36, assuming he does make it that far. And so I got an A from PFF for this pick, I think because he fell a little bit in this mock scenario. So I wouldn't really get hope up too high that Derek Harmon will be there at pick 36. But if he is, I agree with PFF. I think it would be an A pick. He's got the versatility to be not just a 3 tech, not just a 1 tech. He can be a quote unquote big end, like a 5 technique and odd fronts with 5 down linemen. So the versatility is really a plus, and obviously a buzzword that I've been using a lot when talking about the Jaguars' new regime and what they're looking for in players at pretty much every position group. So yeah, Derek Harmon, very happy to have landed him after taking a bit of a riskier selection in the first round. Third round, 70th overall, went with Arizona tackle Jonah Savanea. Savanea. I should have looked that up beforehand. Oh, well. I got a D+ from PFF for this because I think it was a little bit of a reach on their big board. But I'm actually surprised that Jonah from Arizona was still available because I feel like I've at least used to see him as like kind of an early round 2 type selection. But I guess he's more settled in the round 3, maybe even very early day, or the round 3, yeah, or maybe even early day 3 selection. But he played tackle at Arizona. I think that like a lot of tackle prospects in general, there's kind of some concerns about whether he can hold up outside in the NFL. So I think a lot of people are kind of expecting him to be a guard prospect. And I think that would work out just fine for the Jaguars. I think Will Campbell, and I'll just talk about that another day. But I think that like guard is definitely a need for the Jaguars, especially after they signed both Fred Johnson and Chuma Edogo, I think is his last name, in free agency. They secured 2 potential swing tackles, and they also have Javon Foster, the 4th round pick from last year. And so I think that they could take someone like a Will Campbell who would like probably immediately provide competition against Ezra Cleveland at guard. And then like if Anton Harrison or Walker Little like underperformed expectations or got hurt or anything like that, then like you have Campbell as a guy that could slot in as a tackle out wide. But like more so the Jaguars need competition at guard, especially to potentially unseat Ezra Cleveland as the starting left guard. And so I think Jonah from Arizona makes a lot of sense to potentially do that. Definitely wanted to address both sides of the line of scrimmage with 2 of my first 3 picks in this mock. So trench is heavy, but now we're going to the secondary with the Jaguars' 2nd, 3rd round pick. But with Penn State safety Kevin Winston Jr., who is coming off a torn ACL. I think he should be ready for like training camp and kind of all systems go for kind of rookie installments and everything like that. But he is coming off a significant knee injury. I think he's not he doesn't have great instincts. He has like prototypical size and length. He's a really good tackler. Was a team captain, so he's definitely intangibly rich. So he seems like wired to be an NFL player, but just like needs to be a little bit at just recognizing what opposing offenses are doing and being able to be a lot more instinctual and kind of reactive. And so, or not reactive. What's the other word? I don't know. And so, yeah, Kevin Winston, I think, is a guy that like you can maybe immediately be like a core 4 special teamer because of his both traits, both mentally and physically. And then like if he kind of like puts it together fully, then he could be a really, really good starting safety. But yeah, so that one might need a little bit of work, but I'm not against taking a guy that doesn't have great instincts. So yeah, moving on to the 4th round pick, 107 overall, Virginia Tech edge Antoine Powell Ryland. This guy started his career at Florida, so Gators fans might recognize the name. He was 3rd in the FBS last year with 16 sacks, and he has 30 in his career. He spent 5 years at the college ranks, and so this is a guy that I think will really fit the Jaguars' profile of what they're looking for, because he's productive and he's old. And usually the Rams, where both general manager James Gladstone and head coach Liam Cohen came from or used to work at, they really like guys in the draft that are productive and experienced, because that means that they can like help and be plugged in to not even necessarily starting lineups, but just be like plugged in as contributors pretty much right away. I think this is a smart strategy. I feel like this maybe like calling it the Bill Belichick strategy is an oversimplification, but I do feel like Belichick would always like kind of lean towards more so guys that might have had like lower ceilings but higher floors because they were able to contribute right away. Obviously, like getting those kinds of guys are important for Belichick-led teams in New England that were constantly competing for Super Bowls. But even like we've seen with the Rams, like they won a Super Bowl, but then they had to launch into a full rebuild mode. But to get like a lot of young guys who can immediately play right away and get the experience to develop faster is very important. So, like honestly, I think whether you're rebuilding or competing, it does make sense to go after those quote unquote higher floors and lower ceiling guys that maybe won't necessarily develop into all pros at their position, but you can get really good contributors. And so I think that Powell Ryland out of Virginia Tech is kind of that. He doesn't really have a lot of traits that you would really love. He doesn't have a great get off. He doesn't have great speed. He doesn't have great length. And so honestly, like he's gonna like kind of not run directly into opposing offensive linemen, but he's gonna get got like pretty early in the rep, more often than not, honestly. But what makes him really good is his hand usage and his counters. He has a really not just like smart pass rush plan, but diversified pass rush plan. And so it's really hard for opposing offensive linemen to like kind of know what's coming. And so he's really good with his technique. Again, he's really productive. He's spent 5 years in college. And so I think this is a guy that makes a lot of sense to be an immediate like number 3 pass rusher behind Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines Allen. But he would more so be the number 4 in this scenario, I guess, because Jalen Walker would probably be like the de facto number 3 edge defender. But yeah, really like Antoine Powell Ryland. He's probably my favorite pick in this mock that I did this morning in terms of like fits with the Jaguars specifically, because a lot of these others guys, I mean, obviously I spent a lot of time breaking down the Jalen Walker fit, but yeah, I think Powell Ryland definitely a name to watch out for. With the Jaguars, his second 4th round pick, 126 overall, went with Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams. This is probably the pick that I feel least confident in terms of like the guy still being there where I picked him, because I actually overdrafted him a little bit according to like the PFF board in the mock, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Williams was like a 2nd round pick or just a day 2 pick in general, because he's really just continued to flash throughout the pre-draft process. I think he had a really, really strong Senior Bowl, especially showing off his release package. His release package is arguably like the best in the class. He's just such a smooth glider and is able to separate so easily, including against press coverage. And so I think that so last week on Wednesday's episode, me and my guest JP Acosta had a pretty interesting conversation about like what the best prototype of receiver would be to bring in to play alongside Brian Thomas, and to kind of oversimplify it, like would you rather have a guy that's a quote unquote X receiver, but like always pinned on the line of scrimmage and like beating press coverage and not really going in motion as much. So that would be like Kyle Williams. If you get Kyle Williams, he's a guy that you put on the line of scrimmage, which means that like he can't, again, like go in motion and kind of move around. And so Brian Thomas would probably be that guy that's moving and going in motion a ton. or would it be better to have Brian Thomas as like that guy who's mostly attached to the line of scrimmage, so he can't go in motion, and maybe get someone like a Jack Beck or like a Jalen Royals, someone who would be going in slot, both the slot but also in motion a ton for you. So whether or not like Brian Thomas, I think he can certainly do both. Like he can be the guy that's going in motion, or he can be the guy that's attached to the line of scrimmage. But obviously, I think it would open up his versatility a little bit more if you did get a guy like Kyle Williams who was able to beat press coverage and can get lined up attached to the line of scrimmage. And so, yeah, again, I'm honestly pessimistic that Kyle Williams will still be there with 126 pick, but I think that it's just a fun archetype to place, a very fun player in general. Moving on to the 5th round, 142nd overall, went with Benjamin Yorosek from Georgia. I think he's been banged up a little bit by injuries. So he's just been like flying a little bit under the radar, but I think he's a guy that's like almost similar to like Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame. I've seen getting some recent help, and he's another guy that like has been banged up recently. So he's been flying a little bit under the radar. But honestly, both Eurosec from Georgia and Evans from Notre Dame are guys that are like probably going to be like long-term tight end 2 or tight end 3 types, where like they can give you just enough as a pass catcher, where like they can like catch balls like over the seam against linebackers that bite on play action. They can be used on the flats on early downs against zone coverages. But really like their main thing would be just like the blocking element that they added. So I think that Eurosec is definitely a strong blocker. I think worthwhile as a day 3 swing to add to the Jaguars' tight end room, even if they do already have 3 guys that are very likely, in my mind, to make the roster. Okay, 6th round, 182nd overall, LSU tackle Emory Jones Jr. Don't really know a lot about Emory Jones specifically, to be completely honest. I do know that I've certainly seen some hype on the timeline about him. I will say that the LSU offensive linemen in general, I think, are maybe going like a little bit underrated because of like how hard their scheme was in 2024. I mean, really in recent years, but especially in 2024, it was just like always in like true pass drop back situations. And so it was like, it's pretty hard to go for an offensive line in general to go in a ton of kind of obvious passing situations, because then opposing defenses and edge rushers and pass rushers are able to kind of pin their ears back. And so as opposed to like having a scheme that's a lot more like under center, a lot more run heavy, a lot more play action, a lot more like motion and bootlegs and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of different play calls that you can have to kind of like slow down opposing edge rushers and kind of like make them like think of like, oh, where's like the ball really going? But when you're an edge rusher, or I mean, just a pass rusher in general, and you know that the quarterback is just going to be holding onto the ball in the pocket for 3+ seconds for maybe the majority of snaps, it makes your job a lot easier, and it makes the LSU's offensive lineman jobs a lot harder. And so I think Emory Jones, potentially a guy going a little bit under the radar because of what he was asked to do at the college level. But even though the Jaguars did again sign 2 guys in free agency who could potentially be a swing tackle, which if you don't know, swing tackle basically just means like you're the backup offensive tackle, and the right tackle. So Emory Jones, I guess he started at right tackle at LSU since Will Campbell started at left tackle. But someone who could probably move inside, but more realistically is probably going to be a solid swing tackle. Round 6, the second 6th round pick for the Jaguars, 194 overall. I realized at this point that I did not go with a cornerback yet, and that was partly by design because I think that the Jaguars might wait on cornerback, an outside cornerback, a little bit later than at least I personally would like to see maybe. Like I used to be mocking a cornerback pretty consistently in day 2 for the Jaguars, but now I think that they'll probably get someone like more like late day 2 or more realistically early day 3. But I went with a late day 3 pick here in Florida's Jason Marshall Jr., a guy that a year ago, or maybe not, a year ago after last year's draft, I was mocking Jason Marshall as like a 1st or 2nd round pick to the Jaguars. So clearly fell off a good amount, but he had a really, really strong RAS score, just like really strong combine performance. And so I feel like it makes sense to just take a swing on like a very athletic guy late in day 3, an SEC battle prospect as well. certainly some Florida bias bleeding through. But hey, we're in the Final Four. Go Gators. Last pick, 7th round, 221. It went with USC halfback. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but his nickname is Woody Marks. Woody because his favorite movie growing up was Toy Story. Marks started his career at Mississippi State, where he returned a couple of kicks. I don't know if he's really viewed as like a potential NFL returner, but I do think it makes sense for the Jaguars to add a potential NFL returner to like their room of current returners, which is currently like 6th round pick from last year, Kalen Robinson, who didn't really do anything because of injuries. And then Parker Washington and Tank Bigsby are kind of like two of the next men up for Jacksonville's return guys. I feel like Parker Washington will probably just be the main punter, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing the team upgrade for their kick returner. Again, I'm not quite sure that Woody Marks really fits that, but I do think that the Jaguars are likely to 3 pick on a running back. So I'd like them to take a running back that has some kick return experience at least. Marks, more than anything else, is kind of like a typical 3rd down back. I've seen a decent amount of player comps for him to Duke Johnson Jr., the old Cleveland Browns running back. Saw a couple for DeAndre Swift as well. So really dynamic guy, not just with the ball in his hands, but also like getting open against defenders. He's got pretty good vision and a feel for the game, like nice pacing and everything like that. But like due to his size, he's just not going to be like a pile pusher or really like a true. He's certainly never going to be like a true number 1 back. I don't even know if he'll really be like a 1B the way that like a DeAndre Swift kind of sort of turned out to be. But he's probably more so the Duke Johnson archetype, where he's just like valuable on 3rd downs, maybe some early downs, but like you're going to want to weaponize him against like linebackers and safeties and even slower cornerbacks. And so, yeah, I got a C+ mock from PFF. Again, not sure how everyone's going to feel about Jalen Walker. I think that he would be viewed as much riskier than Will Campbell or Mason Graham, which I'm not sure that really should be the general take. But I would be a fan of Jalen Walker. I think that I would definitely want Will Campbell in Jacksonville if he was available at 5 overall. And then there's a little bit of a gap. But to me, like Jalen Walker and Mason Graham, I think that like Mason Graham he's closer as a prospect to Jalen Walker than Abdul Carter, in my opinion. But that is just one opinion. So let us upload some of your mocks and grade them. Let me check these comments real quick to make sure you guys. Dell said, I wasn't sure if Cohen's comments today were a smokescreen, but basically said, we'll see when they get on the field when asked about the offensive line. That's interesting. Dell, I'm really glad you picked up on that because I was going to mention that Liam Cohen did speak this morning at the NFL owners meetings in South Florida. He met with press for 25 minutes or so, and I did listen to that before this show. I was also working on this mock, and so maybe I guess this part I just wasn't listening. I honestly didn't really pick up anything that noteworthy. So, Dell, again, I'm glad that you saw this because I think this is pretty interesting. Cohen apparently said, we'll see when they get on the field when asked about offensive linemen. I think that's fair because, like, as I was saying on, like, Friday's show and maybe a little bit on today's show too, I feel like Armand Membu, as much as I personally like him and maybe the Jaguars like him, I feel like that's a guy that, like, doesn't make a lot of sense for the Jaguars because they have 2 solid offensive tackles already. And it's like, you don't want the best case scenario for the 1st round pick to be that like they beat out one of like your good players. You want like it would be better to like have those good players like hopefully develop into even better players and address like bigger needs elsewhere, I feel like. And so like Armand Membu, I think doesn't make sense because he's some people will say that he might move to guard, but I think he's like clearly an offensive tackle. I think Will Campbell makes more sense because he provides that versatility. But to Dell and Liam Cohen's points, like the offensive line is pretty much set. Like I talked about bringing competition for Ezra Cleveland earlier, but people who have followed my work for a while know that I'm personally higher on Ezra Cleveland than I think most people in Jacksonville are. I think he's a solid player. He also is like certainly going to be on the team for the rest of 2025 because of his contract. And so certainly the Jaguars will add to their offensive line in the NFL draft, but I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of wait around, even if like Will Campbell is there with a 5th pick and they really like him, I wouldn't be surprised if they went in a different direction since they do have a capable 5 starting offensive line right now. And then, yeah, Liam Cohen's comments apparently from this morning add to that. But yeah, that lines up with what we went with because back-to-back front 7 guys in this mock, and then did go with Jonah from Arizona in round 3. So maybe in future mocks I'll hold off on offensive line a little bit longer. TV said, why did the Jaguars take down the interview with Cohen just now? I don't know. Maybe it's because Dell scooped them or whatever. I don't. Maybe there was something that Cohen actually should not have said, so they're gonna edit it out. That's interesting. We'll have to see if the Jaguars end up re-uploading a new video or not. But yeah, it's been 30 minutes already. Usually these Monday episodes are shorter, so let me fly through some mocks that you guys sent to me on Twitter. Thank you to everyone. Gosh, y'all are awesome, man. I had way too many to go through, so we'll just 33 comments it looks like, and so I'll probably just have to go through like the first 5 or 10 that I see, unfortunately. But maybe for next week's show, like I just won't come with a mock and I'll just break down y'all's the whole time. Yeah, I think that could be good. So let me pull something up. Loading music. All right, this one comes from my guy Travis Holmes. You can find him at Travis D Holmes. I'll make a banner. All right, Travis, let's break it down. We went with Malachi Starks with a 13th pick. So I guess you traded down from 5 to 13. Looks like you also picked up the 48th pick. I like that. Here's the 13th pick. Let me look it up real quick. Oops. Who is Miami is a 13th pick. Interesting. Okay, so Travis traded down with Miami to pick up the 13th and the 48th overall picks. It looks like maybe he got 135th overall too. And so Malachi Starks, I'm a fan. I think that he's probably more so like a late round 1, early round 2 kind of guy. So maybe not a lot of value because of that, in addition to the fact that he plays safety, which is kind of a undervalued position in the NFL as a position as a whole. But I'm a really big fan of Malachi Starks. He's the number 1 safety in the class in my mind. I know that Nick Amon-Wari certainly has a lot of fans out of South Carolina. He's very good as well, and I think that both are worthy of like a late round 1 selection. But I also really think the Jaguars need a playmaker over the middle, or at least if not a playmaker, like they need just stability over the middle of the field, because I feel like that's where they usually get torn up. And so I would not. Travis went with Benjamin Morrison, cornerback at Notre Dame. Definitely trust Travis's takes on corners, given that he played defensive back at UCF and like has always been big on kind of watching Jags corners, just watching secondary players in general. So Benjamin Morrison is a guy that's been on my radar for sure from Notre Dame. He's got like kind of prototypical size and length, I'm pretty sure, like a press corner. So I feel like that'd be a really good fit opposite Tyson Campbell, and even with Jordan Lewis too playing out of the slot. Benjamin Morrison I think would be a strong day 2 selection. Deon Walker, love that pick with 48th overall, which I assume was picked up from Miami. Talked about him on Thursday's show with Mia, where he's a guy that I feel like his biggest red flag on his profile is that he plays with like such a high pad level. Not really sure if like he's going to be able to win with leverage very often at the next level. But then I found out that he was playing with like a pretty serious back injury throughout the 2024 season. And so when you're playing with a pad level or playing with a back injury, usually your pad level might not be as good. And so I feel like that question has kind of been answered a little bit for me from Deon Walker. And I think that Deon Walker and Amar Norman-Lott would probably be like the top 2 guys on my list of like defensive tackles with pass rush juice that the Jaguars should look out for, assuming they don't take Mason Graham with the 5th pick. Travis went with Jack Beck, 70th overall, TCU wide receiver. Love that pick. We've talked about him a bunch on the show as a perfect fit for Liam Cohen's offense. He would be more of the guy that's like, as I was talking about earlier, going in motion. He could be a pseudo tight end, lining up pretty much on the line of scrimmage, providing a lot of help in the run game. Can be used in screens. And I think what's important is that like he can be used both on screens the receiver of screens, but also as the blocker of screens. I think it's important to have the versatility there. That's something that I liked about Jordan Lewis's game, actually, when I was watching his film, was that he was just so good at defending screens. Not just like when he was the first guy kind of at the catch point and like it was his man that was catching the screen, he was pretty much always immediately able to get there. But even when Lewis was like kind of sort of away from the play, he was able to, like, his football IQ really showed off in it, how to like evade blocks, especially from offensive linemen, and be able to track down the football. And so, yeah, I think there's like a couple of different important facets screen game as both offensive player and a defensive player. And I think Jack Beck has a lot of great qualities in the screen game and not. Josiah Stewart was Travis's 88th overall pick. Love that one. He's been kind of to mock both Mason Graham and Josiah Stewart coming out of Michigan, kind of like the way that the Rams did last year with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. Yeah, Josiah Stewart definitely, and Tamjuli Rich, definitely the like productive, experienced pass rusher, pocket pusher that I think the Jaguars will be looking for. So, yeah, Travis, you've been knocking it out so far. Jonas Sanker, oh man, Jonas Sanker might be my favorite safety in the class. I don't think he'd be quite what the Jaguars are looking for, because I feel like they have a lot of guys that play closer to the line of scrimmage and need someone who's a bit more rangy, can play more of the center fielder position on the back end. But Jonas Sanker is, in my mind, probably the best box safety in the class. I mean, that might be a stretch, but I think he's a great safety. Pretty sure he led all of college football among defensive backs, at least, in solo tackles over the past year or three. So, yeah, Jonas Sanker, definitely a guy I like. Anthony Belton was Travis's next pick, offensive tackle of NC State. Huge guy. That's really all I know about him, but I know he's got some fans, so don't mind spending that pick there. Jackson Slater is the next pick from Sacramento State. Don't really know anything about him, but he seems to be a very, very popular mock selection, both inside and outside of Jacksonville, as a day 3 interior offensive lineman, so I like that. Pick 142, Rutgers running back Kyle Monangai. I got to get better with these names. But yeah, Kyle, he reminds me a lot of Isaiah Pacheco, Isaiah Pacheco, which is probably a decent amount of helmet watching or helmet scouting, because Pacheco also came from Rutgers. But I think that Pacheco flew a little bit under the radar just because of how bad, especially his offensive line, but really like the whole ecosystem Rutgers offense was when he was there. And I think you can say a similar thing about Kyle. So next to defensive tackle, Cam Jackson from Florida. Go Gators, love that. Next, linebacker from Kentucky, Jamin Dumas-Johnson. Don't really know a lot about him. I've definitely seen the name, though, so sure. But I have not seen this last name that Travis went with. Oh, I just seen now. He also picked up a second-round pick from Miami, so Travis absolutely fleeced the Dolphins. But last pick was Wyoming offensive center Nofoya Tuafanoa. Oh, my gosh. That was brutal. Travis, well done. I'm giving you an edit. This was sick. I didn't recognize a couple of the last names, but to recap Travis's mock, Malachi Starks, Benjamin Morrison, Deion Walker, Jack Beck, Josiah Stewart, Jonas Sanker, Anthony Belton, and Jackson Slater kind of round out his top 7 or 8 guys. Obviously, picking up the extra capital from the Dolphins is amazing. I think that maybe Jaguars fans would be a little bit underwhelmed by getting Malachi Starks as like their number 1 player in the class. I think that a lot of Jaguars fans probably would be like ecstatic to get Malachi Starks as like the second guy in their draft class. But even still, I'm giving this an A. I like this a lot, Travis. Let's do another one. Loading music. That was good. That was kind of good, wasn't it? All right, 007 Clay. No, I butchered the name. I'm so sorry. It's single 07 Clay from Twitter. He went with Travis Hunter, 5th overall. I think that's very unrealistic, but I also think there's a non-zero chance that it does happen. So, sure, yeah, Travis Hunter would certainly be a home run pick. He's the number 1 player in the class to me, so I personally would absolutely love that. I think that he and Brian Thomas Jr. would immediately be the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL. Yeah, that's how highly I think of both him and Brian. I think Brian's already like obviously a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL in my mind. I think you could make the argument that he's top 5. And I think that Travis Hunter, assuming that he does play a good chunk of wide receiver, if not wide receiver full time, would be like a Justin Jefferson level prospect, and like pretty much immediately be like kind of like what Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas were last year. Just step into the league and immediately have the explosiveness to prove himself as a top 10 player at his position. I also think that he's also honestly probably an even better cornerback prospect, so I wouldn't be that upset if the Jaguars did take him and they made him more of a cornerback full time instead. That'd be fine to me. Just get him on my team. So not certainly can't grade that pick poorly, even if I don't think it's that realistic to happen. Single 07 Clay copied me though, or no, he didn't copy me because I went with Derek Harmon, but Single 07 Clay went with Kenneth Grant, Michigan defensive tackle, with pick 36. So definitely like the idea of taking one of the top defensive tackles available in the class at the top of the second round. If you do not go with Mason Graham in the first round, then Single 07 Clay copied my guy Travis by taking Jack Beck in the third round. Went with Marcus Mbow out of Purdue, who played tackle. It's probably more realistically a guard, but I don't know. I think that Mbow can play tackle, but like either way, I think he's got the versatility to be good at either position. One of my favorite players in the class. I really like that pick. Next pick was Virginia Tech running back Bai Shul Tutton, who I feel like I've heard a decent amount of people say that they're fans of, but I don't really know a lot of information, to be honest. Virginia safety Jonas Sanker, love that pick. Just talked about him. Indiana offensive tackle Trey Wedig. Don't recognize that name, but I do recognize Notre Dame tight end Mitchell Evans, who I talked about during my own mock. So love that one. Western Kentucky cornerback Upton Stout. Don't recognize that name, but it seems like a cool pick. And Alabama edge Q Robinson will round it out. I'm giving this one an A. Yeah, this one's good. You cooked, man. Good job. I like this. My favorite picks were definitely Jonas Sanker, Mitchell Evans, and Marcus Mbow. But I mean, if Travis Hunter is a Jacksonville Jaguar, then like they automatically get like 100 out of 100 in my eyes. That's a silly thing to say, honestly. Obviously, the rest of the draft still matters, but I guess my point is that even if not that the rest of the draft picks don't matter, but even if the rest of the draft picks are complete busts, like I'm so confident in Travis Hunter not being that, and not only not being a bust, but being a future star, that yeah, that'll work. Let's do one more. So next week, I'm sorry to everyone who submitted a mock. Thank you again. Over 30 mocks submitted. And so what we'll do next week, I just won't do a mock myself, and I will spend time kind of pre-uploading all of these mocks, and then just go through all of what you guys think. But let's just do one more for today. Music. That one wasn't as good. Let's do the dunk theory. Can we zoom this in a little bit more? I'm sorry, dunk theory, but your mock is so small. That's not what I want. All right, whatever. I gotta find a new mock. I'm sorry, it's too small of an image. I'm gonna be squinting. All right, let's go with Nash Jags Nats 22. Looks like he did his mock on NFLMockDraftDatabase.com. Pretty good resource for just consensus big boards, and then also to see who's like the most commonly mocked player to your favorite team. Went with Travis Hunter again at pick 5, so love that. Luther Burden was the pick at pick 36. I don't think that he's going to be a guy that the Jaguars love, just because I think that there's not even like there's not off the field issues with him, but I think there's arguably on the field issues with him where he like will just kind of like walk through a decent amount of routes where he knows that he's not getting the ball. And I think that some of that is justifiable because like the offensive scheme did him absolutely no favors in 2024 and not really a lot of favors in 2023 either. And so like when Burden does get the ball in his hands, he's absolutely electric. He's like not as good of a tackle breaker as Deebo Samuel, but he's really good at just evading tacklers in general. And so he'd be a really nice fit for the Jaguars. It'd be absolutely wild for them to get Travis Hunter and Luther Burden. Like Liam Cohen could just call like 4 screens and just like alternate between that, I feel like, and it would be amazing. But yeah, Luther Burden, me personally, I have him like he'd be top 10 on my big board. I'm just such a believer in his talent. I think that he's got like more of a ceiling of like a DJ Moore type player as opposed to like a Debo Samuel, whereas like Debo is like as amazing as he was in his prime, he was never like really a complete outside wide or a complete receiver who could like consistently win outside, and that's okay because that's like not what he's asked to do. But I think Burden is just like a little bit more complete, kind of like DJ Moore, where like he certainly has the capability to take like just a screen or a slant or something basic all the way to the house, but he also has like some just special acceleration, which I think is like the better comparison to Debo Samuel's game, where like I feel like Debo, like his tackle breaking was sick, yeah, but like he accelerated like honestly no one I've ever seen before. And Luther Burden's acceleration is maybe in that same class. And so he's like the top end speed is like not necessarily amazing, but because of like threatening Luther Burden's acceleration is, that just makes him even more dangerous. And so he can be used as like a guy that even if you kind of foresee him as being like a gadgety guy that gets a lot of targets close to the line of scrimmage, I think that because of his acceleration, he can also kind of like threaten defensive backs and help take the top off of defenses, and the other guys like Brian Thomas and Brendan Strange kind of work more underneath or in the intermediate levels of the field. And so again, I love Luther Burden. I think that he would be an absolute steal at the 36th pick. I just don't know that the Jaguars would certainly be interested because they preached so much this offseason about getting intangibly rich guys. And I think that even if you say that like Burden was like showing frustration on the field by not trying all the time because he wanted to like be more involved and like it was because of his competitiveness, you can still kind of like harness that competitiveness and like, I don't know, just like go block your ass off or something. I don't know if the Jaguars are going to really love those effort levels. So I don't know about the fit for Jacksonville specifically, but I love the player. The next one, Jonah, let's see. Dell gave me a pronunciation earlier. Savanea. That's easy. Jonah Savanea from Arizona was Nash Jags Nats 22, third round pick, 70th overall. Talked about him already. Also talked about Deion Walker, his next pick, 88th overall. Certainly love adding those two trench players on day two. Really like this 107th pick, Dorian Strong, cornerback out of Virginia Tech. I don't have a ton of info to provide on Dorian Strong specifically, but what I can tell you is that he's one of just a handful of cornerbacks to have met with the Jaguars publicly. And so if you want to know all of the players that the Jaguars have met through the pre-draft process, check out Big Cat Country's tracker online. But yeah, Dorian Strong, like I was talking earlier about how I think that I would like to see the Jaguars take a cornerback a little bit earlier, but I think that they'll probably end up taking a cornerback like late day 2 or early day 3. And Dorian Strong is definitely like the number one guy on my radar as like sort of a mid-round cornerback prospect for the Jaguars. So love that one. Really like this next one too at 126. Nash Jags Nats 22 took Billy Bauman, Oklahoma safety. I would like the Jags to spend a little bit higher on a safety. Like I really like Andrew Mukuba from Texas and Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State. And I mean, obviously Nick Emanwori and Malachi Starks. The latter two did both meet, or actually Starks, Emanwori, and Mukuba have all met with the Jaguars. They all met with the Jaguars at the NFL Combine. And so I wouldn't be shocked to see the Jaguars spend pick on the safety position a little bit earlier in the draft, but I do think that Billy Bauman, along with Jonas Sanker, is probably like the top guys at the top of my list of like a late day 2 / early day 3 selection as someone that can be a potential starting safety for the team. Billy Bauman, I've seen some Tyrann Mathieu comps for him, which seems a bit bold to me. I feel like Tyrann Mathieu is such like a not just good player, but a special and like unique player that I have a hard time like seeing like a 4th round type prospect being mocked someone of that caliber. But what it really says about Bauman is just like how energetic he is, how much he flies around, how great his instincts are. He's a little bit undersized too, which I think is also where the Mathieu comps come into play. But yeah, Billy Bauman, certainly a playmaker. I think he has like the most interception return yards out of any player like across the past 2 years combined. certainly a playmaker, and that's why I would like that pick. Next up is Jared Ivey, edge out of Ole Miss. Don't know anything about the player, but I like where you put the edge position in. As I think a few of these mocks have reflected this morning, I wouldn't be surprised that whether Mason Graham is the picker at 5th overall or not, would not be surprised if the Jaguars went with an interior defensive lineman first before going for kind of a productive, pro-ready edge type guy in the middle rounds. Next up is Johnny Cornelius, offense tackle from Oregon. Don't know anything about him. Sorry. SMU running back Brashard Smith is up next. Don't know anything about him. Sorry. San Jose State wide receiver Nick Nash is the last pick in this mock. I've seen some good things. I've just seen that Nick Nash is the day 3 sleeper you should know, but don't really know much beyond that. But yeah, to recap this one, Travis Hunter, Luther Burden, Jonah Sabanea, Deion Walker, Dorian Strong, Billy Bauman, Jared Ivey, Johnny Cornelius, Brashard Smith, and Nick Nash. That is a strong draft. I got to give that one an A too. I'll give it an A-, I guess, just because I don't know about the Luther Burden fit, but I don't know. Travis Hunter, best case scenario. That's all you really need to know. But yeah, again, thank you to everyone who did submit mocks. Next Monday, I will just spend the whole episode going over y'all's mocks. That was a pretty fun time. I'll come up with a little bit of a better grading system, I suppose. So yeah, thank you guys. As always, I will be back tomorrow at 9:04 a.m. Eastern with Hayes Carline. And that'll do it for today. Take care, everyone. Peace out.